My name's Carter, I'm 26, and for the better part of my life, I played the role of the invisible one in my family. Not the golden child, not the rebel, just the one who quietly did what needed to be done, stayed out of fights, and picked up the pieces behind the scenes. But I'm starting to realize that being invisible only works until people forget you're the one holding the foundation together. I grew up in a house where respect was demanded, not earned. My dad, Frank, was the type who measured your worth by how loudly you could brag about your job, how early you woke up, and how quickly you could dismiss someone else's accomplishments. My mom kept her head down most of the time, and my younger sister, Julia, learned early on how to mirror Dad's moods to stay in his good graces. Julia was smart, manipulative smart. If Dad barked about pulling your own weight, she'd conveniently show him a perfectly timed bank transfer she made for groceries, funded by the joint account we both contributed to. Guess who usually forgot to put their name on things? Yummy. When I turned 18, I didn't go to college. Not because I didn't want to, but because someone had to help with the bills when Dad's back went out and he was between jobs. That between period lasted 6 years. I took the first job I could get, night shift stocking shelves, then transitioned into remote IT support. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough, especially once I started picking up freelance contracts. I never made a big deal about it. I paid half the mortgage, the insurance on both family cars, and most of the utility bills. Not once did I complain, because in my head, this was what you did for family. You stepped up when others couldn't. Except, apparently, none of that counted. About a month ago, the shift began. It was subtle at first, Dad making jokes at my expense during dinner. So, Carter, how's your online clicking job going? Still fixing grandma's computers? Stuff like that. Julia would smirk over her pasta, clearly enjoying the show. I'd respond calmly, not really taking the bait. But it escalated. One night, Julia barged into my room with her arms crossed. You left the gas tank low again, she snapped. I had to be late to work because of you. I blinked. You drove the car last. No, I didn't, she said, then turned and yelled toward the hallway. Dad, didn't Carter say he was taking the car last night? Frank stomped into the room like a warden inspecting a cell. Son, it's not that hard to fill a tank. It's basic respect. Dad, I said carefully, Julia used the car. I was working a double shift last night from home, remember? He didn't even pause. Don't get smart with me. There was no winning. So I apologized just to end the scene, but something in me cracked a little. I started noticing other things. My contributions were being erased. When the insurance got paid, Julia would say, thanks, Dad, for keeping us covered, even though I was the one who set up the auto pay from my account. When groceries showed up, Julia would hand Dad the receipt and get a pat on the back, despite me quietly transferring money every Sunday to cover them. I began tracking it all, dates, payments, receipts. Not because I wanted to start a war, but because I wanted to prove to myself I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining the slow, steady dismantling of my place in this family. Then came the night everything exploded. We were eating dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and that stale silence that only shows up when people have a lot to say but prefer to weaponize the quiet. Julia had just finished telling Dad about her rough day at work. She worked part-time at a boutique that our cousin owned. 3-hour shifts, lots of phone breaks, and free clothes. She sighed dramatically. I just wish someone would appreciate how much I do for this family. I looked up from my plate, eyes narrowing. What exactly do you do, Julia? Dad's fork clattered on his plate. Watch it. No, I said, pushing my plate away. I'm genuinely asking. Because from where I'm sitting, you live here rent-free, use the car I pay insurance on, and spend more time posting on Instagram than at work. Julia's face flushed. Wow, just because you're bitter about your life doesn't mean you get to attack mine. I'm not bitter, I said, heart pounding. I'm tired. Tired of carrying everyone and being told I don't exist. That's when Dad stood up. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His voice dropped into that icy tone he reserved for discipline. You think you're some kind of martyr, he said. You're a leech. You've never lifted a finger for this family. You just skulk around, acting like you're better than us. My mouth opened, then closed. I felt heat rise in my chest. You can't be serious. If you've got any dignity, he sneered, leave. I waited for Mom to speak up. She didn't. She kept buttering her bread like she was trying to disappear. Julia looked smug. Like this was the victory she'd been waiting for. So I stood up. Not out of rage. Not out of pride. Just tired acceptance. I didn't slam the door or say some cool one-liner. I just went upstairs, packed a bag, grabbed my laptop and charger, and walked out. No shouting match. No teary goodbye. I got into my car, the one still under my name, and drove to a friend's place. The first night, I cried. Quietly. In the guest room, under a ceiling I didn't recognize. I cried because I'd spent years breaking my back for people who saw me as nothing but a placeholder. I cried because part of me still wanted to go back. But I didn't. Instead, I opened my budget spreadsheet, then the family account, then the insurance portal, the phone plan, the joint Netflix, every financial thread I'd been holding together like glue. I made a list, then started making phone calls and sending emails. The car and its insurance? Canceled. Both were under my name. The phone plan? I transferred my number and canceled the rest. The Netflix? Deleted. The utility bills? Changed to paper billing, marked final notice. The shared Amazon Prime? Logged out and changed the password. I wasn't being cruel. I was reclaiming what I had been told I never contributed. If they truly believed I was a leech, I was going to show them what life looked like without the freeloader. For a few weeks, I heard nothing. I started sleeping better, eating better. I even picked up a new freelance client. Life didn't just go on, it got lighter. Then, 3 weeks later, Julia called me. I let it ring. She called again, then texted, "Why did the car and insurance payments vanish? We can't get into Netflix." Dad's furious. I stared at the screen for a long minute, then typed back. Odd. I was told I never contributed. She left me on read. The next day, I got a text from Mom. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. But that's when things really started to spiral. And trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. Mom didn't text again after that. At least not right away. But she must have said something to Dad, because 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I usually let those go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. "Carter," a gruff voice said. It took me a second. "Dad." A pause. "Yeah. Listen, we need to talk." Not "how are you?" Not "I'm sorry." Just "we need to talk." I stared at the ceiling for a second, then leaned back into the couch. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "I'm not asking," he said flatly. There it was. The tone. The one that worked on everyone else in the house. I used to respond to it automatically, like a reflex. Not anymore. "You kind of are," I replied. "Since I'm the one who'd have to agree to it." A long pause. Then a sigh. "Look, your mother's upset. Julie is running around like her head's cut off trying to get things sorted, and you?" I asked. Silence. "I'm managing," he said. That was the first honest thing he'd said in years. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. Just hung up. And I didn't call back. But I started hearing things through the grapevine, mostly through my cousin Gabe, who I'd always been close to, and who didn't get along with Julia. He'd message me occasionally to check in, but this time, he had real news. "Dude," he wrote, "your dad came into the boutique screaming at Julia last night. Said she promised she had the car payment handled and that they got a repo notice." I blinked. "They haven't paid it in a month." He sent back a laughing emoji. Then, "She tried blaming you. Told everyone you ghosted and left the family in a financial mess." Funny, I wrote back. That mess was always mine to clean. That weekend, I went for a long drive. No destination in mind. Just me, some music, and the open road. For the first time in years, I felt not angry, not sad, just still. Like I'd stepped outside the storm and could finally hear my own thoughts again. But peace doesn't last forever. Not when the house you escaped is falling apart. The following Monday, my phone blew up. 3 missed calls from Julia. 2 from Mom. 1 from an unknown number that turned out to be their insurance agent. I ignored them all. Then Gabe sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post from Julia. Some people will pretend to care about family until they're no longer getting something out of it. Be careful who you trust, especially if they live in your house and act like they're doing you a favor. Real ones show up when it matters. The comments were split. Some people offered sympathy. Others clearly read between the lines. One comment said, "So, your brother moved out and you're mad he stopped paying your bills?" Another just said, "Oof." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That post wasn't for me. It was for show. But it told me one thing loud and clear. Julia and my dad hadn't learned a single lesson. They were still trying to rewrite the story, still trying to paint themselves as victims while quietly hoping I'd come back and fix it all. No chance. The tipping point came a few days later. I was working from the co-working space I'd joined. Quiet place, free coffee, decent Wi-Fi, when I got a call from the leasing company that managed my parents' house. "Hi, is this Carter Ellison?" "Yes. This is Melissa from Carlton Properties. I'm calling to let you know the mortgage payment hasn't been received this month. I understand you've been the primary payer on the account for the last 18 months. I sat up. I was. But I removed myself from the auto pay a month ago. There was a pause. I see. No one from the household has contacted us about the change, and the payment is now 14 days past due. I wanted to make sure you were aware, since your name is still listed on the emergency contact portion of the lease. I'm not responsible for the account anymore," I said, a bit more sharply than I meant to. "I haven't lived there since last month." "I understand," she said kindly. "In that case, I'll remove your name from the contact list. Thank you for confirming." I hung up and stared at the wall. So, they hadn't even tried to cover the mortgage. Either that, or they thought I'd keep covering it from a distance, out of guilt or obligation. I don't know which one's worse. That evening, I got a long email from my mom. She never wrote much, but this was practically a novella. She didn't apologize, at least not directly. She said things like, "Your father is under a lot of stress, and Julie is still young and doesn't understand the weight of responsibility. And I know you felt unappreciated, and I'm sorry if we didn't express our gratitude enough." Then came the twist. She asked if I could help, just for a few months, until they got back on their feet. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Because for once, I wasn't the one scrambling to hold the house together. I wasn't the ghost silently covering their tracks. They were finally feeling the absence they claimed never existed. And then, just when I thought the drama had hit its peak, Julia showed up. At my friend's apartment. In person. I'll never forget the look on her face. Panicked. Pale. Holding an envelope in one hand and her phone in the other. "What's wrong with you, Carter?" she snapped. "They're saying the car is going to get repossessed. The mortgage is overdue. Dad's threatening to sue. What are you doing?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who had never faced consequences until now. "I'm doing what you told me to," I said quietly. She blinked. "What?" "I'm leaving. Like Dad said. If I had any dignity." Her mouth opened, then closed. "This isn't funny. This is serious. We could lose the house." I stared at her. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you erased me from it." She stood there for a long second, like she couldn't figure out whether to yell or cry. Then she held out the envelope. "We need your signature to transfer the car title. Otherwise, we can't refinance the loan." I took the envelope, opened it, then slowly, carefully, tore it in half. Her gasp was audible, and that's when the doorbell rang. I turned toward it. She didn't. But I knew, right then, in that moment, that what was coming next would finally change everything. And you won't believe who was standing on the other side of that door. It was Frank, standing right there on the other side of the door, in his wrinkled flannel shirt, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. His arms were stiff at his sides, fists balled like he thought we were about to box. Behind him, the rumble of his rusted pickup idled in the street, the passenger door hanging open like he'd leapt out in a rush. Julia spun around. "Dad." He didn't even look at her. His eyes locked on me. "Carter, we're going to fix this. Right now." I didn't invite him in. He stepped in anyway. "Seriously?" I muttered, glancing at my friend's hallway. "Don't worry," I said over my shoulder to Josh, my roommate, who'd peeked out of the kitchen. "He'll be gone in a minute." Frank crossed the room like he owned the place. He stopped a few feet from me and planted himself like a statue. "This has gone far enough. You think? You made your point," he said, ignoring my tone. "The house is falling apart. The car's at risk. You left, we felt it. We get it." Julia hovered by the door, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her jaw twitching. Frank took a breath. "Now it's time to come home and put it back together." I actually laughed. Not loudly. More like a short, sharp breath of disbelief. "You don't get to call the shots anymore," I said, folding my arms. "You told me I never contributed, that I was a leech. You told me to leave." He didn't flinch. I was angry. "You disrespected your sister." I raised an eyebrow. "By asking her what she actually does?" "That's not the point." "No, Dad," I said slowly. That's exactly the point. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he was the one exhausted. Look, he said finally. You were right. About a lot of things. Julia should have been paying more attention. Your mom and I should have thanked you more. But none of that changes the fact that we're family. We need to support each other. The words sounded right. But the delivery? Empty. Mechanical. Like he was reading them from a script someone else wrote. I waited for the part where he said he was sorry. For the part where he admitted how badly he'd messed up. It never came. Instead, he shifted tactics. If you don't help us out here, they'll take the house. I know, I said. His eyes narrowed. You're okay with that? I took a deep breath. I'm okay with not being guilt-tripped into fixing a situation I didn't create. Frank took a step closer, and for a second I saw it again. That old look, the one he used to give me when I was 10 and broke something, the one that came before the storm. You're going to let your mother get kicked out of her house? He said, voice low, like he was giving me one last chance. That one hit harder than I expected, but I held my ground. You had no problem letting me walk out with nothing, I said. So maybe you can survive without me for once. His face twisted. Not in anger, exactly. More like disbelief that his old tools weren't working anymore. That I was no longer bendable. You ungrateful little. I held up a hand. Nope, not today. We stood in silence for a few seconds. Then Julia, still at the door, snapped. You're really going to let them take Mom's car over a grudge? I turned to her slowly. You remember the day Dad told me to leave? I asked. She rolled her eyes. Of course. You remember what you said after I walked upstairs? No. I do, I said. You said, well, at least we'll finally get some peace around here. Her expression faltered. You knew what that meant, I said. You wanted me gone. People say things, she mumbled. We were angry. No, I said calmly. You weren't angry. You were entitled. And now you're panicking because your safety net got scissors taken to it. Frank muttered something under his breath. I caught the word drama. I turned back to him. What's the mortgage payment again? $1,450. His eyes narrowed. Why? You still don't get it, I said, shaking my head. I was covering that. Quietly. Every single month. On top of the car insurance. The internet. The utilities. All while you told people I just sat around on my computer all day. He shifted uncomfortably. And you want to talk about family? Julia was blowing $300 a week on online shopping while I was covering groceries. You never once asked why the fridge was always full. You just assumed. Frank didn't respond. Because what could he say? Then Julia spoke up again. So what now? You're just going to watch us crash. That was the first time she sounded truly scared. Her voice cracked just slightly at the end. I softened, barely. I didn't want any of this, I said. I wanted a family that respected each other. One that talked. One that didn't gaslight the one person keeping it all afloat. Frank turned toward the door. You've made your choice. Don't come crying to us when you need something. I haven't needed anything from you in years, I said. You just didn't notice. He opened the door, paused, then walked out without another word. Julia stayed for a moment longer. You think you've won, she said quietly. No, I said. I think I've finally stopped losing. Then she followed him. The silence that followed their exit was unlike any I'd ever known. It wasn't tense. It wasn't lonely. It was clear. I turned back to the envelope she'd left behind, now in pieces on the floor. I bent down, picked it up, and tossed it in the trash. But what happened next? I didn't see it coming. And it all started with a knock on my door the next morning. A quiet, tentative knock. Not Julia. Not Frank. Not even my mom. But someone I hadn't seen in years. And they were holding a folder labeled Power of Attorney. It was my Uncle Ben. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer. A little thinner around the face. But the calm was still there. The same quiet energy I used to cling to as a kid when our house was loud and full of shouting. Ben was my mom's older brother, and unlike the rest of my family, he never yelled, never judged. He moved to another state over a decade ago after a falling out with Frank that was never fully explained to me. Just one day, he stopped coming to holidays, and Mom stopped mentioning him. Now he was standing on my doorstep, holding a thick folder marked Power of Attorney. I blinked. Uncle Ben. He gave a small nod. Hey, Carter. What are you doing here? I asked, stepping aside instinctively so he could come in. Ben walked in slowly, like someone who didn't want to bring dirt into a clean house. He glanced around the living room, then sat on the edge of the couch and placed the folder on the coffee table. I heard what happened, he said. I frowned. From who? Your mom. I paused. She told you. Bits and pieces, he said. Enough to know that something finally snapped. She sounded tired and scared. I sat across from him, not sure where this was going. Ben tapped the folder. Before we get into that, I need to tell you something, and I want you to listen all the way through, okay? I nodded. He took a breath. Your grandfather, my father, passed away 4 months ago. Peacefully. He'd been sick for a while, and he made me promise not to tell anyone until after everything was handled. No funeral, no drama, no public announcement. My eyes widened. I didn't know he was even still alive. I know, Ben said quietly. That was his choice. He cut ties with your dad a long time ago, and your mom never brought it up because she didn't want to stir things. I leaned back. Okay. Ben opened the folder. Inside were documents, legal ones. Signatures, seals, bank forms. He left his estate to me, Ben said. But there was a clause. If I didn't want it, or if I felt someone else was more deserving, I could transfer the assets. And I've been thinking about that. A lot. I stared at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm transferring it to you. My heart skipped. Ben smiled slightly. Your grandfather followed your life, through me. He asked about you every time we talked. He knew how much you were doing for your parents. How little credit you got. And when I told him you were still living at home, still working 2 jobs to help them stay afloat, he said something I won't forget. Ben leaned forward. He said, that boy's the last good Ellison. Protect him. I swallowed hard. The estate includes about $320,000, Ben said. Mostly from a property sale upstate and a few investments. It's yours now. Clean. No debt. No obligations. I blinked. Uncle Ben, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he said. Just listen to what comes next. He slid another paper toward me. This is the deed to your parents' house. Your dad never fully paid off the mortgage, and for the last few years, it was refinanced under a contract he didn't read closely enough. Turns out, Grandpa was still technically listed as a secondary lien holder. When he passed, that ownership stake transferred to me. I froze. Ben nodded. I now legally own 49% of that house. And after everything I've heard, I want nothing to do with it. But I also don't want it foreclosed. So here's what I'm proposing. He placed one more document on the table. You buy out the remaining 51% of the house. Not to move back in. To take full control. You'd be the legal owner. You could sell it. Rent it. Or, if you wanted, evict them. The silence that followed was deafening. Why me? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Why not just sell it off? Ben looked me dead in the eye. Because I trust you to do what's right. Whether that's mercy or justice, that's up to you. The next week passed in a blur. I signed papers. Met with a lawyer. Wired funds. I used a portion of the inheritance to pay off the balance of the mortgage and officially purchase full ownership of the house. Then I sent a letter. To Frank and Julia Ellison. Subject, change of property ownership. Dear Frank and Julia, this letter serves as formal notice that the title and ownership of the residence at 12 Kingston Drive has been transferred to Carter Ellison, effective immediately. The property is no longer under mortgage, and all utilities and liabilities must be updated to reflect the change in ownership. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. If you wish to negotiate a lease agreement as tenants, you may contact my legal representative. Rent terms will be at market value, with all utilities handled independently. Please treat this notice seriously. Sincerely, Carter Ellison. 3 days later, the call started. First Mom, then Julia, then Frank. I didn't answer any of them. On day 5, I got a voicemail from Mom, crying, telling me this wasn't fair, that they didn't know, that they needed more time. On day 7, I got a voicemail from Frank. No crying, just rage. You think you're the big man now? You think you can just waltz in and take everything from the people who raised you? You're nothing without this family. Nothing. I deleted it. On day 10, Julia showed up at my apartment again. I didn't open the door. She left a letter taped to it. In it, she begged me to reconsider. Said she had nowhere to go. That she had job interviews lined up and just needed a few months to land on her feet. At the bottom, in scribbled handwriting, please don't kick me out. Not like this. I know I messed up. That one stung. Because for all her faults, Julia was still my sister. But the wounds were too deep. The manipulation too ingrained. I couldn't go back. Not even halfway. On day 15, my lawyer sent an official follow-up. They had 2 weeks left. By day 27, I got one final email from Mom. We're moving out. I hope you're happy. I hope the silence you've built around yourself keeps you warm. I read it 3 times before closing the tab. They left. Quietly. No drama. No final confrontation. One of my neighbors said a U-Haul came and went in the afternoon. Frank didn't even say goodbye to the neighborhood kids he used to scold for walking across the lawn. Julia posted a cryptic story on Instagram about being betrayed by those you love most. It got 3 likes. And just like that, the house was mine. I stood in the driveway a week later, key in hand, staring up at the place that had drained so much of me. It looked smaller now, less like a fortress, more like a shell. Inside, everything was still. They'd taken most of the furniture. A few things remained: an old lamp in the hallway, a cracked photo frame of the family from a decade ago, Julia's pink coffee mug left behind in the sink. I walked through each room slowly, breathing in the silence. It wasn't victory I felt. It was closure. I didn't burn the place down. I didn't scream or gloat. I just stood in the center of the living room, took a deep breath, and let it all go. All the resentment, all the guilt, all the years of feeling unseen. Gone. Today, the house is rented out to a family who reminds me of what I used to think family meant. Kind people. Honest people. The kids draw chalk art on the driveway, and the parents pay rent on time. I check in occasionally, not because I need to, but because I want to. As for me, I used the rest of the inheritance to put a down payment on a condo across town. Clean, quiet mind. I sleep better. I work less. I've started dating again. I even picked up painting, a hobby I always wanted to try but never had the space or peace of mind for. My phone is quiet these days. The silence Mom spoke of, it does keep me warm, because it's mine. And every now and then, when I think back on that night, on the words that broke me, I smile. "You're a leech," he'd said. "If you've got any dignity, leave." So I did, and I found out I was never the leech. I was the backbone. And when I left, the whole house of cards finally collapsed.